All right, we're backing up anything that Facebook might take off, and we need to be. We really do need to get this done. One of the things that I realized might be taken off is this first podcast interview I ever did, which was with Jon Schober,
Post it
and
live. So if you are joining,
um,
yeah. Okay. Well, every
so let me stop sharing my screen. Make sure that the original sound for so this was on December 30th, 2020. I was in Texas. All my exes live in Texas. And Jon offered to have me on the podcast. Sorry, I'm getting these. Hmm, having an issue here. Internet issue. Not sure if I'm on the internet. It's really slow. It's not pulling up, man. Let me stop my screen sharing. I'm going to pause the recording.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Today is 8 April 2025. It's a Tuesday. And I just had it. I don't know what's happening here. Man, this is frustrating. Okay, there it is again. Let's try it again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everybody, we're pre-recording this, but I'm going to post it live. So if you are joining this stream as it goes live, welcome. I have my Facebook friend, Dr. Lucas Mather. By the way, congratulations on earning your Ph.D. Well done. Lucas is someone that I have followed for a couple of years, and really excited to have a conversation with him today. So as many of you guys know, I posted something a couple of weeks ago about being more intentional in my political activism in 2021. And one of those things that I want to do is start having some conversations with people like Lucas and others, and really kind of talk through and be a lot more intentional. It's very easy, especially right now, to kind of rant on Facebook. So what we want to do is we want to have a conversation, and we're going to kind of talk about how we use Facebook. But I think the theme of this conversation is going to be about persuasion and teaching. So with that as the theme, Lucas, hello, welcome.
Hello, good to be with you.
Well, give us a little bit of your background and what you do day to day.
Well, the background is I think it's I don't know what this window is made of exactly, but we have some brick here. Oh, you mean academic background.
Yes, yes. You're a very literal person, aren't you?
I really apologize for that. I'm so embarrassed. My academic background, I've taught philosophy, logic, politics, constitutional law, stuff like that for 15 years. And before that, I have a background in Chinese.
I was just home from 24-hour fitness there in Rockwall, Texas. Um, so this is the house in, oh gosh, what was it? Rockland or Rockwall?
So in your academic, one of the things that I like about the way that you post, a lot of the things that you post are kind of conversations that you have with your students. Would you kind of give us a little bit of your, why do you teach? What motivates you to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And then tell us about some of these conversations and how you teach and perhaps persuade through that communication.
Well, there's a lot packed into that question. I think you asked, why do I teach, right?
Yes.
To make the world a better place, because ignorance is dangerous and arrogance is dangerous. There's a lot of intellectual arrogance out there and lack of humility, lack of curiosity. That stuff is a killer for civilization.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So try to knock it out of the students.
Yeah.
Oh, how do I teach?
Yeah.
The methods, lecture mainly, and then the lecture, I think if it's done right, you try to enforce the reading by dialogue. That's how I do it, dialectic, engaging the students, putting them on the spot. And then if you do that well, and there's a good dynamic in the class, hopefully you have some help from the students, then the students will do the reading and they'll come up with questions that they have that makes the lecture and the dialogue more interesting than it otherwise would have been.
Yeah.
So ideally, that's how it works.
So,
and then that's.
So how would you sort of measure success, or what do you consider a good class? What for you makes a good class?
If the students respond, the students don't always respond in the way that I hope they will. But yeah, I'd say if the students respond well,
yeah, and
the earlier the better in the semester, and rather than right at the end.
Right at the end when you're gone, when they're gone.
Sometimes that does happen. They get it at the end.
Yeah,
but I've had that happen. I've actually had that happen where they get it after the semester, and they respond to me later. So. Do the best you can.
Do you make a distinction between teaching and persuading, and where do you make that distinction, especially as it relates to the classroom?
Yeah, I think I see you're going somewhere with that, and I'm not quite sure if I'm going to fit into what you're going for, but when I think of persuasion, I think of advertising. I think of trying to get somebody to do something or to think something for just a small period of time. Doesn't necessarily, a lot of people that are good at persuasion aren't very deep people. The advertising people are like this. They're not typically not very deep people. They happen to be born maybe with an innate an ability to, some people might say BS, and where they can monologue for short periods of time in compelling ways and have charisma and all that stuff. So that's what I think of when I think of persuasion. But that's only one type of persuasion. Another type would be a deeper kind, which makes a more lasting impact, a longer lasting impact, and. So I'm not very impressed with persuasion. Because persuasion, I mean, it's nice, but it's only nice if what you're being persuaded of is true and important. So think of political ads, for example. I'm rarely impressed with those, or just even advertising for anything. And I've taught business in business departments for over a decade.
Right.
So I've taught business majors for a long time at the university, and business ethics and public policy, and we talk a lot about marketing and advertising and stuff like that.
Right.
But the kind of persuasion that I'm going for is about the important things, the deeper things that I think will sustain us. and sustain them personally.
Yeah. And as people kind of come into your classroom, where do you think that they are? Are they having these kind of deep conversations, or are they, just listening to the 5-minute ads? Where are your, I'm assuming your typical students kind of 18 to 25. Where's their head at when they walk into one of your classes?
Well, I've had students from the ages in college. I've had the students from ages, believe it or not, from 13 up
Wow.
to about 90.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've taught in the community colleges for so long. I've taught in the community colleges for the longest, actually. But you're right. In general, it's between 18 years old and mid-20s, I suppose. They are distracted. They're bored. These are the huge challenges. They're aimless. They're not quite sure of themselves and what they think about things. Sometimes they think they are sure, but they're not really.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I'm dealt with.
How does that manifest itself, especially the ones that think they're sure, but they're not really? How does that manifest?
There's a lot of looking at phones, which is the most annoying thing for me in the classroom, because they don't do the reading. So if they don't do the reading, they're wasting my time. They're wasting their own time. And I mean, I still get paid, but it's wasting my time. Yeah. I'd rather be paid to make the world a better place. I'm kind of greedy in that way, I guess.
Right.
So I don't like to let that fly, and they usually don't like that. They fight me on that. But yeah, so stuff like technology. There's a drift against books. And what I mean by books are books like this. This is a book.
Like a real book, not an article.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. People say online books. Well, I'm talking about a book, an object, physical object.
Right.
And there's a drift against that, and I fight against that too, because anything that's online, there's just too much temptation. They don't have the discipline. I mean, I grew up without that stuff. So I mean, sometimes even I have a problem. Sometimes. So I know that they have no concept of what life is like with just books and stuff like that, paper. Yeah. People brag about going paperless, and I think it's horrifying.
It's funny. I'll share a little story. Growing up, we homeschool all of our kids, and one of the things that I'll say up front, I lost this battle. Okay, but one of the battles that I fought for is, back when I was a kid, if I didn't know how to spell a word, I didn't know what a word meant, go to the dictionary, and I had to go to the dictionary, not dictionary.com. Yeah. But an actual book, a dictionary, and I had to, kind of take a guess at how I thought this word was spelled, and
very important.
Look it up, and I didn't realize at the time, but I'm convinced that actually helped me develop a vocabulary, because sure enough, I would not just find my word that I was looking for, I would find all these other words. I mean, even if it was just sort of accidentally, I would increase my vocabulary. And so, you will use the dictionary, but again, going back, I'm kind of the lazy one, so I don't actually do the teaching. My wife does the teaching, and since she was like, well, if you're not going to enforce this dictionary thing, I'm going to give them the online dictionary, because I've got 7 kids that we have to educate here. So I failed.
And Dad.
Oh, this is Rachel. This disembodied voice here is my daughter, Rachel.
I'm one of them who has successfully graduated at this point, starting off using the real dictionary. but I just had this memory of one of the ways we kind of won that battle with the kids was we convinced you that you would go on dictionary.com and look at their word of the day every time we needed to look something up.
That's true.
So that way we could still increase our vocabulary.
No, thank you for saving my soul a little bit.
Well, let me add to that discussion of the dictionary issue, online versus print. I walk the walk here. I really do. By my bedside, I have a dictionary under my bed. It's a thick one. It's a paperback, but it's a thick one because I'll read in bed before. We don't have a TV in our bedroom. We don't have anything like that. So it's books before bed, and it's preferably fiction, not anything, no problem solving kind of stuff before bed. Just narrative, just fictional. And I encounter words that I don't remember, or words that I've seen for the first time, and so I'll look them up, and then I have a chair in my office. I think pretty much anywhere you can sit, actually, we have dictionaries available, hard copy dictionaries. And I'll tell you a story about that. And I think it was 2017, Pepperdine University in Malibu. I was teaching this class on Western foundations of our civilization, and I can't remember exactly how it came up, but somehow the definition of marriage came up. And these kids were all brainwashed about the definition of marriage. And I was like, Lord, how am I going to get through to these kids? I remember what happened. There was something that was just really bothering me. It was Chick-fil-A. Yeah, Chick-fil-A came up, and there was a restaurant called Mao's Kitchen, which was not too far away in Los Angeles. And Mao's Kitchen has a picture of Mao Zedong right above the cash register.
Wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He killed a few million people. He's fantastic.
Yeah. So I did use the computer to pull up how many people he killed, which they weren't sure if it was 45 million or 78 million. It was something like that.
Right. We'll just go on the low end. If you have 45 million.
So I asked my students there at Pepperdine, who's worse as a restaurateur or someone who's honored by a restaurant, Mao's Kitchen or the guy that founded Chick-fil-A? And they said the guy that founded Chick-fil-A was worse than Mao.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, and I said, why? And they said that because he discriminated. And what they really meant was he believed that the definition of marriage was what the English language says that it is.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, this was related to the material because we were going over the great texts of Western civilization, and we had gone over parts of Genesis, including Adam and Eve, and the definition of marriage and what that is. And so I was driving home that day, and there was a used bookstore that I go to a lot. And I felt like God said to me, go to the bookstore, get used dictionaries. So I went there and I spent about $100 on used dictionaries, and I brought about 10 dictionaries in because these kids go online and if they use a dictionary, it's that. But the online dictionary can be edited at 2 a.m.
Well,
by some guy.
You laugh, but that literally happened a couple of weeks ago.
That happens. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, no one's keeping track, right? But the fact that you could, and you know about it, and I know about it, I've seen it happen, and there's no accountability for that. Whereas a print volume, so I brought in dictionaries from, all the way back to the 1800s, and I've gone into the archives and looked myself, so I know there's this stability in the definition of marriage. And I think the latest dictionary I brought in was from 2015 or something, Oxford English Dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
So I had, Black's Law Dictionary. I had all these dictionaries. I had Oxford English Dictionary. I brought this dictionary in that was so huge that you needed a microscope to read it. It came in 2 volumes, hardbound, and the microscopes came with it. The Oxford Press gave you a microscope to read it. And anyway, I brought those in.
I should just add here, not a microscope, a like one of those detective glasses. What do you call those? A magnifying glass. Those came with it.
And I said, so let's get this clear.
The used bookstore, by the way, was Half Off Books in Whittier, California, just off Greenleaf. Wonderful location. They've since moved to Fullerton.
You think that Dan Cather, whatever the guy's name is that founded Chick-fil-A, he believes the dictionary, and that's what makes him worse than Mao Zedong, who killed 45 million people. I'm just trying to get clear here in this class. Anyway, they couldn't believe that the definition of marriage, man and a woman, necessary conditions, was in those dictionaries. And I said, it's in all of them.
Yeah.
And it's in my MacBook Pro, my Apple book MacBook Pro. I have brought that with me. It was in there too. They were shocked. They were shocked. They rushed up there, and I'd never seen it. There was like puppies, at feeding time. And they were scouring through all these hard copy dictionaries and stuff like that. So I won that round.
Right. But and this is what continues to bring up, is I think one of your techniques is you force your...
Hold on one sec. I want to add something here. That was the 11th time I taught that course called Western Heritage, Ancient and Medieval at Pepperdine. I taught for over a decade at Pepperdine. And I'd never seen the students so bad before. It was horrifying. It was horrifying.
Students or engage or how. Right. But and this is what continues to bring up, is I think one of your techniques is you force your students or engage or however you want to put it to define the words that they're articulating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that right there, in terms of persuasion, getting people to define what they mean, I think that's huge.
It is huge. That's a good connection with persuasion. For me, I guess I didn't really think of it as persuasion, but I guess that's interesting. For me, I just didn't want to let it go. I don't let things like that go because they learn the wrong lesson, I think. Or even if they come to disagree with me about certain policy things, they won't do it for the wrong reason or for bad reasons, at least.
Right.
Or they won't continue on in their BS.
Right.
Because, they were just BSing at that point. But they're
I'm
feeling
sure...
good because they're going to go to Chick-fil-A. They're going to go to, and they don't really believe he's evil. They don't really believe that. That's just something they say.
Right.
So, and I was trying to get them to see that they're sitting on this tradition. It's not an accident that everybody uses the word this way. It goes way back. So if you don't agree that that's what marriage is, then tell me what it is. Tell me the new definition.
Right.
And of course, they when they're put on the spot like that, they come up with crazy definitions that make absolutely no sense.
Yeah. I'm going to assume that probably abortion and the choice versus life paradigm comes out frequently. Do you use some of those same techniques on those types of topics?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, a key word would be person. What's a person?
Yeah.
What's a human being?
Yeah. in some senses, you have a little bit of a relationship, a little bit of a power dynamic with your students, right? Teacher-student dynamic.
Although the power dynamic is not what you think it is.
We will save that for another conversation
Yeah.
about education, and
Sure.
and I know you love grade inflation. You're a big fan.
That's worth it. That's another topic. That's another whole conversation.
Full disclosure.
Actually, I think they're actually more powerful than professors are. That's why there's so much grade inflation.
I think you're actually correct, right? Because they have the money, or more importantly, the government funds them with lots of free money that they can then give to the administrators, and that's what makes the world go round.
Yeah.
At the school. But what about in some of these dynamics where you're talking to your peers who presumably are educated? What happens when you talk to another professor or peer, and you kind of challenge them, or get them to think? I mean, do they just kind of look at you like you have a third eye, or what does that conversation kind of look and sound like?
It depends. I'd say, generally speaking, in my experience, my colleagues are in an echo chamber that's self-created. They could easily get out of it if they wanted to. I'm assuming, but it's a comfortable place to be. I think they think they're in the middle of the road, but they're really far left. And they would know they're not in the middle of the road if they were not in their echo chamber. So they generally look at me like some kind of alien once it's clear to me that I disagree with them about something that they thought we agreed about.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, one time I wore an NRA hat to a campus in West Los Angeles, which was a predominantly Democrat campus. They had Bill Clinton as one of the main speakers there. I think it was 2016. So the husband of the major candidate, and that wasn't an accident because it's a Democrat campus. And the philosophy department and the theology department shared a kitchen. And I was in there, and one of the senior tenured theology professors came in, and it looked like he about had a heart attack. Because I'd seen it, I'd known him for about 10 years at that point. And he looked at my hat, and he was just stunned. Now, to put this in some context, I don't know what your listeners know about campuses or what. Every campus is a little bit different, but I document this with photographs on my Facebook. Every single tenured professor had some kind of Democratic propaganda smashed all over their office door. There is definitely no doubt that where they're coming from. For example, one professor.
This is at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. I'm an alum of that, and I taught there for over a decade. I got a lot of experience with that campus. I saw a lot of stuff. Some of it, a lot of it, I couldn't not see. Man, what a piece of work these guys are, these Dems.
Had prominently displayed during Kavanaugh, Nope, and it was a picture of Kavanaugh, and it said Kava Nope. And it was a huge it was several huge posters. It wasn't just one. Stuff like "Don't deport my students" popped up when Trump was running. Histrionically, entire walls covered.
Yeah.
And so I would say something like, you're only worried about students that can't, that pay their tuition being deported. I mean, so in other words, if they give you money, they can stay. So I would point out stuff like that.
Right.
I would also point out that you need an ID to be on campus. Otherwise, campus safety will kick you off the campus. And there's walls around the campus. There's actually gates, and there are people that enforce so I would point out stuff like that. And all I'm doing is pointing out stuff that's obvious, but there's so much BS and an echo chamber again. So it's just a matter of feeling, if you feel like saying something, you got to be ready for it, because there's a social cost to it.
Yeah. No,
and sometimes there's a professional cost to it.
What about on the flip side, with the students that maybe is a little bit more aware? Maybe they've been thinking deeply about these subjects, and unfortunately, they don't have you as their professor, right? They have the guy with the insert your Democratic propaganda slogan on his desk.
Yeah.
What thoughts, advice do you give to that student?
Depends on what the class is. I've taught.
I'll set it up. So regardless of the class, the professor is bringing in very biased information and is assuming that information, and forcing the class to assume that is correct information. So let's, which unfortunately I've seen professors in all kinds of topics, right, do that.
I mean, the way I think about bias is that everybody's biased.
Absolutely.
So I don't really hold that against any professor, unless it's a class that has nothing to do with that stuff you're talking about. I don't know if it's computer science or engineering, mathematics. I don't know, but the stuff that I teach is so controversial inherently that even the way you present the material, what you have on the syllabus versus what you have off the syllabus, the kind of textbook that you have, I think it's virtually impossible to do it in an unbiased way. So I don't try to be neutral. I don't try to be unbiased. I just try to be honest about where I'm coming from and truthful. I try to be truthful. Being truthful, I think, is more important than being in neutral or whatever. I think of neutral as a gear on a car. Or
the absence of a gear on the car.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's true. So many, if the car's on a hill, the car will be rolling backwards. And so neutral is not really where you want to be. You want to be in drive. So you can get up that hill. So I try to be in drive because I'm fighting against the context, which is making us go backwards. But some of these other professors are actually in reverse, and they're going they're going faster backwards. So, I don't know if I have a one-size-fits-all advice for that student, because it depends. I mean, it depends. How badly do you need the class? It might just be that you want to get through the class as soon as you can. In general, I would say learn as much as you can from everybody that you encounter, and realize that there's something valuable you're going to take away from that experience. It is frustrating when there's such a lack of awareness about a topic. Yeah. So I feel like I'm pretty well balanced, because I am who I am in such an extreme environment on the other side.
Yeah.
So I'm not as worried about my students coming away unbalanced. I think actually my students come away very balanced. I'm trying to correct something. Yeah. But for those who are just trying to get by through the colleges, it's a delicate thing to give advice to a student like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could do a good job.
let me give another scenario. So instead of the student's perspective, the professor, or maybe the student that wants to be a professor, sees all the things that are wrong. At least they assess as wrong with specifically higher education, whether that's grade inflation or lack of honesty. I would agree to you, everyone has a bias. I don't have a problem with someone having a bias. I have a problem when someone is dishonest about their bias.
And unfair.
And unfair about their bias, right? So
Sure.
I'm sure we could, again, sort of go through this laundry list. Again, I'm speaking as a parent. So 3 of my children are college aged. One of them, in fact, Rachel on the phone, she's at Texas A&M. She's an engineer, although she's not going to drive locomotives. So she went the traditional education route. My son, self-taught software engineering and software development, and he's has a very successful career with a large software development company here in Austin with no formal education.
Amazing.
Very little formal computer science education. My third oldest daughter graduated from high school, and she went and she has become a fitness trainer. We have Camp Gladiator here, which is sort of a boot camp fitness style. And so here she is. She's not even 21 years old yet, and she is training 130 people weekly in these outdoor boot camps. Well, now it's indoor. She had to turn all these into Zoom calls because of COVID. So my question is, for those people that maybe they're in the profession, they're in the teaching profession, and I'll even sort of specifically say higher education. So let's specifically talk about the university level. How does someone save or help or improve? What would you say to that person that has a heart for the next generation, that wants to improve our world, and they've gone through the process of developing the skills and the things that they need to be a good instructor, professor, but they're down, they're depressed, they want to just give up? What would your conversation with that person look and sound like?
It depends on how long we had to talk. and because you really have to narrow it down to something more specific for them, because everybody's going to have different issues and different problems and contexts and stuff like that. I'd say in general, I'd try to be as encouraging as possible, and I would try to get through, if it wasn't already gotten through to them, that we need a multi-pronged approach. It's not just one person that can fix this. It's got to be everybody working together to fix this. So, for example, grade inflation, that is a killer for education. It's an absolute.
And just by the way, for people that don't know what grade inflation is, what is grade inflation? How do you define grade inflation?
Pressure to inflate grades on the professor. It's a structural problem. It's a recurring problem because of the design of higher education. The professors are evaluated by the students, and that is a very bad design, because the students have this power now to really, there's all this, they want high grades. What do students want? They want to be entertained. They want high grades for little work. Most of them want that.
Right.
There are exceptions, but the exceptions are a minority. And so there's now this institutional pressure on professors to artificially inflate grades. In other words, give a student a grade that the professor doesn't think that the student really earned, and over time, it becomes something like even more sinister, which is watering down the material and making it easier to get that grade that they were otherwise uncomfortable giving. So over time, this is a problem that happens over time. So, and that's exactly what you see in college. The bachelor's degree is worth far less than it used to be because there's democratic pressure on, from the many. That's the democracy means the many rule, right? There's many who are trying to get the professor to do something. And the professor, what does the professor have? The professor, it used to be that the professor had the institution behind him, and you had to please the professor. That means you had to work hard, and the professor wanted you to work hard. And that was a win-win, because ordinarily it was a win-win. There was bad professors, of course, but what would happen is you would work really hard and you would bust your tail and you would become better as a result of it. Ordinarily, that would be the case. Yeah. But now, students just take it for granted that they don't have to do much to get through. So they don't work hard. They're lazy. They're entitled. And now they need to do more and more just to make ends meet. And they're spending more for a poorer quality degree, and the taxpayers are paying more for it. Yeah. And now you have to get a master's degree. It used to be you didn't have to do that. It was the quality was there younger. So we're extending adolescence into the 30s now, and there's all this debt. And does that have anything to do with the challenges we face as a country? I don't know what this has to do with your original question, but it's kind of a tangent, but that's all right, because conversations always go off on tangents.
Yeah, it's always
if they're real.
Yeah.
If they're a real conversation, they always do.
Absolutely.
If it's an artificial conversation, then but this is a real conversation.
So let me have another real conversation question, and so this is a question I always.
Okay, well, let me hold off right there for a sec. I want to point out that we were honored on the podcast to have Jon Schober. We had Jon Schober on the Republican Professor podcast, and I wanted to show you the video of that. So I'm just going to the videos. I'm going to show you here. Let me share my screen. Feel free to call me Sharon. Happy to be called that. So Jon Schober was on the podcast, 2022, I believe. I think it was late 2022. It would have been in November, I believe. So let's see here. There's the mayor of Newport Beach. There's Tedla. Sarah Jackson. Scott Wenig, Lucas Morell, Master Chief Larry Wilski. Where's Jon Schober? I thought that I think I went too far here. Hold on, let me see. I was just trying to eyeball it. I thought I was going to be able to do that. But there's Rob Coons. There he is, right there. There's Jon Schober's podcast interview right there. And so this was August 4th, 2022. And I think you should go to that episode. He was nice enough to have me on his podcast. I have permission to share on mine. We're kind of co-producing it, I guess. It first appeared on his, but I have permission to publish that first one on mine, which is what I'm doing. I never did. I thought I backed it up, but it's good to have this record. So I'm just cross-sharing. We're cross-sharing here, which is pretty common on podcasts. And I wanted to let you know he was a Texas State House candidate, and he talks about the lessons he learned running for office there on the Republican Professor podcast. 45 views so far, August 4th, 2022. And so check that out. Check him out there. Let's get back to the Facebook recording there, backing this up for posterity. Okay. Great. We continue. Oops. Okay, we're having an issue there. Let me go ahead and pause.
Recording in progress.
All right. Yeah, we had an issue getting it back, but here we are. Oh, we're having the same issue.
Kind of last question. And you can answer it in any context. So I give you permission to, answer it in the context of what we've been discussing or not. So just however it hits you. And the question up at night. And so again, you can answer it in any context, and you can also answer it in either a positive or a negative. So this is what I'm so excited about. This is what I see the future, and it keeps me up at night because there's so much opportunity that needs to get done. Or, and this is actually an or, the coming apocalypse. I see the zombies approaching, and they're at my door, and I can't sleep at night because the zombies are about to come eat my brains. So, Doctor, what keeps you up at night?
In general, if I make the mistake of trying to do some problem solving at night, then that's what keeps me up at night. That's why I try to read fiction. Mm-hmm. So, but sometimes it does keep me up at night. Where are we going as a country? Is there any way back? Mm-hmm. I do believe that we have a potentially bright future. I believe that there are opportunities for growth all the time, and we just have to know where to look, and we have to seize them when they're there.
It's like a Chinese movie. My lips are not matching the words. I'm not sure if that's this particular playing of it or if it's on the original. I don't remember it being on the original, but.
And I think that there's opportunities for preparation for bad things. And I'll give you one example of that.
I'm a star of a Chinese movie now with no subtitles.
I have relatives that support the Second Amendment, but they've never actually gotten out and bought a firearm or had done any training, even though they live in locations where the laws are very faithful to the Constitution and they're appropriately liberal in the classic sense. Mm-hmm. And it just drives me nuts. I don't know why you would wait until some kind of disaster to take advantage of that. Especially, I'm coming from a location in California where there's a constant battle against the Second Amendment. There's a 10-day waiting period, which makes no sense. This 10-day waiting period exists for every single firearm purchase, no matter, even if you're a collector. And this is the you already have another gun. So the way they justified the 10-day waiting period was it's a cooling off period in case you were going to go commit a crime with that.
But I've already got 4 others. So I should have my card if we're going to do that.
How's that work? I mean, I'm going to cool off. And anyway, you might not think that it's a big deal, but like, for example, this virus thing, the panic with this virus thing, the regulations on this were so horrible.
I apologize for the poor quality here. It looks like my facial stuff is a few seconds behind, a second or two behind the words. So, just deal with it.
There are people that had bought a firearm because they were concerned about their personal safety because the sheriffs were saying they're going to have less of a presence on the street and they're going to be letting people out of jail because of the virus. And you're talking about violent felony, people being let out. And our sheriff, fortunately, didn't do it. By the way, when I say multi-pronged approach to these problems, I'm heavily involved in local politics.
Yes.
So I was behind our sheriff publicly. My face is right next to him in certain things.
Right.
And I'm part of an organization that was helping that. But yeah, so let's say that you go and you buy a firearm and it's an emergency. You have to wait 10 days.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If you don't pick your firearm up in that window, there's a 20-day window.
Okay.
So from day 10 to day 30, you have to do that background check again. You have to pay more fees, and the fees get higher every year.
Right.
And you have to do another 10-day wait. Anyway, they were shutting down gun stores, and the gun store is the only place that you can pick the gun up.
Right.
So in other words, you're paying all this money and you can't pick it up, and you risk losing that money because the government shut down the place of business.
Right.
And not to mention, the 10-day thing was extended to 30 days because the government wasn't doing the background check in time. And
I guess that the government could take us, there was no consequences if the government was slow, and now you're back in the deal.
No. And again, the lawful use of this item, which everybody agrees is a lawful use, is self-defense. That's a paradigmatic lawful use of a firearm, going all the way back as far as firearms. As far as there have been weapons, that's a lawful use of a weapon, is self-defense. And so self-defense sometimes is an emergency, and these policies actually mitigate against being able to respond to an emergency. And at the same time, it's the BS. That's why I hate BS in the classroom, because they grow up and then become a sheriff or a mayor or a governor, and the BS is still flying out of their mouth. They never had a professor that knocked it out of them.
Right. Well, look. It's hard to believe, but we have a movement. We have elected officials who got elected on defund the police. It boggles the mind that someone would even say that, and make a campaign out of it.
And the police really is BS, though, because
it's complete.
They don't really believe it. Every leftist needs the police to enforce their police state. They love gun control laws. Well, who's going to enforce those laws? It's going to be the police.
It has
to be the police.
Yeah.
So they'll realize they need the police when they.
I would push back. Okay, so now we're going to continue this conversation, because you've just hit something where I've got to push back on it. Unfortunately, I would have believed you. In fact, if you had said that to me 9 months ago, I would have said, you're right. The government needs the police to enforce their stupid laws.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with a stupid mask on my face, to some extent, yes, I could get fined, but to more extent, the number of people that will just hassle me.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
And and you had to please the professor. That means you had to work hard, and the professor wanted you to work hard. And
I went back a little bit.
If you ordinarily, it was a win-win. There was bad professors, of course, but what would happen is you would work really hard, and you would bust your tail, and you would become better as a result of it. Ordinarily, that would be the case.
Yeah.
But now, students just take it for granted that they don't have to do much to get through. So they don't work hard. They're lazy. They're entitled. And now they need to do more and more just to make ends meet. And they're spending more for a poorer quality degree, and the taxpayers are paying more for it.
Yeah.
And now you have to get a master's degree. It used to be you didn't have to do that. It was the quality was there younger. So we're extending adolescence into the 30s now, and there's all this debt. And does that have anything to do with the challenges we face as a country? I don't know what this has to do with your original question, but it's kind of a tangent, but that's all right because conversations always go off on tangents.
Yeah, it's always
if they're
interesting.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they're a real conversation, they always do.
Absolutely.
If it's an artificial conversation, then but this is a real conversation.
So let me have another real conversation question, and so this is a question it'll be kind of the last question, and you can answer it in any context. So I give you permission to answer it in the context of what we've been discussing or not. So just however it hits you, and the question is, what keeps you up at night? And so again, you can answer it in any context. And you can also answer it in either a positive or a negative. So this is what I'm so excited about. This is what I see the future, and it keeps me up at night because there's so much opportunity that needs to get done. And this is actually an or, the coming apocalypse. I see the zombies approaching, and they're at my door, and I can't sleep at night because the zombies are about to come eat my brains. So, Doctor, what keeps you up at night?
In general, if I make the mistake of trying to do some problem solving at night, then that's what keeps me up at night. That's why I try to read fiction. Mm-hmm. So, but sometimes it does keep me up at night. Where are we going as a country? Is there any way back? Mm-hmm. I do believe that we have a potentially bright future. I believe that there are opportunities for growth all the time, and we just have to know where to look, and we have to seize them when they're there.
This is from Wednesday, December 30th, 2020.
And I'll give you one example of that. I have relatives that support the Second Amendment, but they've never actually gotten out and bought a firearm or had done any training, even though they live in locations where the laws are very faithful to the Constitution and they're appropriately liberal in the classic sense. And it just drives me nuts. I don't know why you would wait until some kind of disaster to take advantage of that. Especially, I'm coming from a location in California where there's a constant battle against the Second Amendment. There's a 10-day waiting period, which makes no sense. This 10-day waiting period exists for every single firearm purchase, no matter, even if you're a collector. And this is the you already have another gun. So the way they justified the 10-day waiting period was it's a cooling off period in case you were going to go commit a crime with that.
But I've already got 4 others. So I should have my card if we're going to do that.
How's that work? I mean, I'm going to cool off, and anyway, the you might not think that it's a big deal, but like, for example, this virus thing, the panic with this virus thing, the regulations on this were so horrible. There are people that had bought a firearm because they were concerned about their personal safety, because the sheriffs were saying they're going to have less of a presence on the street, and they're going to be letting people out of jail because of the virus. And you're talking about violent felony people being let out. And our sheriff, fortunately, didn't do it. By the way, when I say multi-pronged approach to these problems, I'm heavily involved in local politics.
Yes.
So I was behind our sheriff publicly. My face is right next to him in certain things.
Right.
And I'm part of an organization that was helping that. But yeah, so let's say that you go and you buy a firearm and it's an emergency. You have to wait 10 days.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If you don't pick your firearm up in that window, there's a 20-day window.
Okay.
So from day 10 to day 30, you have to do that background check again. You have to pay more fees, and the fees get higher every year.
Right.
And you have to do another 10-day wait. Anyway, they were shutting down gun stores, and the gun store is the only place that you can pick the gun up.
Right.
So in other words, you're paying all this money and you can't pick it up, and you risk losing that money because the government shut down the place of business.
Right.
And not to mention, the 10-day thing was extended to 30 days because the government wasn't doing the background check in time. And
I guess so the government could take us, there was no consequences if the government was slow, and now you're back in the deal.
No. And again, the lawful use of this item, which everybody agrees is a lawful use, is self-defense. That's a paradigmatic lawful use of a firearm, going all the way back as far as firearms. As far as there have been weapons, that's a lawful use of a weapon, is self-defense. And so self-defense sometimes is an emergency, and these policies actually mitigate against being able to respond to an emergency. And at the same time, it's the BS. That's why I hate BS in the classroom, because they grow up and then become a sheriff or a mayor or a governor, and the BS is still flying out of their mouth. They never had a professor that knocked it out of them. You know.
Right. Well, look. It's hard to believe, but we have a movement. We have elected officials who got elected on defund the police. It boggles the mind that someone would even say that, you know, and make a campaign out of it.
The defund the police really is BS, though, because
it's complete.
They don't really believe it. Every leftist needs the police to enforce their police state. They love gun control laws. Well, who's going to enforce those laws? It's going to be the police.
It has
to be the police.
Yeah.
So they'll realize they need the police when they.
I would push back. Okay, so now we're going to continue this conversation, because you've just hit something where I've got to push back on it. Unfortunately, I would have believed you. In fact, if you had said that to me 9 months ago, I would have said, you're right. The government needs the police to enforce their stupid laws.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have to walk around with a stupid mask on my face. To some extent, yes, I could get fined, but to more extent, the number of people that will just hassle me, and I just don't want to deal with it. Right. It's a risk reward conversation. Yeah, I just want to go get my coffee from Starbucks or from the grocery store. Right. I just want to go get my coffee and my groceries.
That's
and
right.
I actually am a nice person, and I don't always want to debate and argue people all the time. So what do? Like, I comply. I put the stupid face mask on. Now I do have a thriving merchandise business called Jon Schober Approved Face Masks, and I have lots of slogans that I've put on my face mask. So there is no doubt that I am wearing this in protest, and I make sure that everyone knows of my protest.
That's great. That's great. I was just at 24-Hour Fitness, and there's a sign that says mask required, and throughout your visit, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And everybody has them on their chin.
Yes.
So it's just fascinating. The human. It's totally right. They don't want to. There's some kind of force or pressure just to have it on your face, but then that whatever force or pressure there is, social or otherwise, legal, just kind of dissipates. And so as long as you have it hanging off your ears, that's where we're at now.
Right.
You're not going to get harassed socially.
Right. Exactly.
So, but you can just see the BS. It's just like no one even believes it.
No, completely not.
So,
well, I don't know if Rachel or Jennifer are still on the phone, but if you guys are and have a question from our audience on what we've talked about, if you want to chime in. If not, we'll edit this part out of the video.
I don't have a question right now. I just have a quick comment about this mask thing. One of the ways that I have currently decided I like to wear my mask is looped around my glasses, hanging over my face. So it covers my nose and my mouth, but it's not even touching my ears.
That's awesome.
That's a protest right there.
Yeah, it is definitely a protest event. And we'll see what happens, but it does concern me. I thought it was the government use of force. Like, go into another thing, right? I mean, I was always concerned, First Amendment, free speech. Oh, the government's going to stop it, and growing up, it was all, no, don't let the government do this stuff. I never would have thought that it was Facebook and Google. Like I had the naivety to believe in the internet was this place of free expression, right? And here we are. It's not the government. Now you could say, well, it's China, but I would say that Facebook is happily doing what China wants to do, and they're spreading it to the United States. So I don't think that it's pressure from China. It is reality. These people, these individuals, Dorsey, Zuckerberg, they themselves do not want free speech, and it becomes a very difficult problem to unwind. And again, I thought I was worried about the government, and it ends up being the business, who I love, that is taking these things away from us.
Yeah, well, they're Democrats, so it's not an accident. I mean, you might think it might surprise you at first, but there's a reasonable link between the folks that run these bureaucracies that are private, but they resemble the government in certain ways. They're huge and unaccountable. For example, if you have a problem with Facebook, who exactly do you contact? If they add a notice to your post, how do you complain about it? Or will you get a response with a name, somebody with a name? It's exactly like the government. The letters that the government will send you now are not signed. Yeah. That didn't used to be the case. It used to be that the government sends you a letter, somebody signs the letter, an individual signs the letter.
Yes.
But at a certain point in the past, not too long ago, the government would just send you a letter, and it's not signed by anybody.
Right.
Like the IRS will send you a letter, and it's not even signed.
Yes.
Like when you send something to them, it's got to be signed.
Oh yeah.
Right. But when they send something back, it's not signed.
Yeah. And there's no accountability.
There's no accountability. That's the point. So that's what they love. The leftists love no accountability. They love bureaucracy. They love no accountability. They love control. And they love censorship. Leftists love censorship. Socialists like censorship. Communists like censorship. So it's not really surprising in that way. What's the problem is that there's now a link between, or a relationship between these big tech companies, these big social media companies, and the government. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I'll watch C-SPAN, and I was watching Mitch McConnell give a talk on C-SPAN, and under his name on C-SPAN, it said @Majority Leader. It was his Twitter handle.
Right.
The way I get updates from the Senate Majority Leader is mediated by a Democrat.
Yeah. Wow.
The guy that runs Twitter.
I actually had not thought about that, but you're exactly right. And then
that's
these
like
guys are
official
censoring what
thing.
they say.
Sure, and that's an official thing now. They have official Twitter handles as a matter of government policy, but Twitter is run by Democrats. It's not run by Republicans. And of course, Twitter is censoring stuff that Democrats don't like.
Okay, let me just add here. Again, this is originally from Wednesday, December 30th, 2020 at 5 p.m. We're both in Texas at the time of this interview. I was in a suburb of Dallas, and he was, I don't know where he was actually. I forget. But this is just days before Twitter, run by Democrats, took the President of the United States off of Twitter. A sitting president. So I was all over that before that happened. This is Wednesday, December 30th, 2020. Okay? Keep the timeline going in. Again, I have permission to cross-post this on my podcast. You know, this is pretty common for podcasters to cross-post on each other's podcast. Again, look up the former State House candidate Jonathan Schober on my podcast, which was from about 2.5 years, a year and a half later-ish, August 4th, 2022. There I am with the Orange County Sheriff candidate, Don Barnes, who won. And this picture was from April of 2018. He won in 2018 in November, and he is the current Orange County Sheriff. This is at J.T. Schmidt's in Anaheim. There I am right behind him at the debate with my Defense Language Institute hat on with a coat and tie. All right, let's continue this.
So that's the problem there, as I see it, is the mediation between government and us is through Democrats. And it's just human nature to have an abuse of power. And I mean, you know, it's not anything inherently wrong with one party or another insofar as that goes, but it's really human nature. You know, the problem of power corrupts, and I think in general Republicans like more accountability than Democrats do, and that's why I'm on the Republican side.
I'll just add one thing. I actually, as part of my more intentionality, and you actually brought it up, you know, again, we can sit here and we can talk and we have, great conversations, but if we're not willing to get involved, whether that's with, Second Amendment or whatever, this is all an academic conversation. And so one of the things that I did is I applied for our city's, we have a community development corporation, which is essentially a special company that a city creates, and these CDCs, they're the ones that go out and buy a tract of land and kind of help recruit big companies over here. And one of the questions that came up in this interview process, the city council, I sat before the mayor and the city council, and we had an interview. And one of the questions that came up was, should we use these community development funds to do parks and roads and transportations? And it got to my turn to do it, and I said no. And the reason I said is it all came down to government accountability. And good government has clean roles and responsibilities and is accountable. And if you have money that's set aside for this one thing, community development, recruiting new businesses, and you start using that pot of money for parks, especially when you have a whole parks and recreation department that gets its own funding, well, now you're not accountable anymore. That's how boondoggles, happen, and slush funds and all of these other things. Now, I did say that in regards to transportation, if we were talking about, a curb cut or expanding a road for a specific, that's a little bit of a gray area, very different from, well, we're going to bring in light rail, or we're going to bring in, sort of this mammoth thing. And it all came down to and that's what I told them. I answered, I said, from a governance philosophy perspective, it's all about accountability. And if you're mixing up all of these funds, you're not being accountable, you're not being transparent, and that's not good governance.
Yeah. Good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very fine example of being active in this whole thing. Getting involved in local politics, county politics is wonderful training for the challenges that we face, even on a national level.
Absolutely.
So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Lucas, I appreciate your time. I appreciate this conversation. I'm not going to say that it didn't go where I thought it was going to go, because I wanted it to be a conversation. So it went exactly where I wanted it to go. So thank you so much for your time. And
absolutely.
At the risk of giving out your social media that is managed and controlled by these Democratic leftists, how does someone follow you? How do they get official Dr. Lucas Macker information?
Mediated by Twitter. I think my Twitter handle is @RepublicanProf, I believe. I think that's as many characters as they let me have.
Okay.
And the same on Instagram. I don't know if there's underscores between. I think it might be the Republican Professor on Instagram. I forget. Something like that. And then on Facebook, I also have that on Facebook, but I haven't done anything with it. So it's just my name on Facebook.
Yeah.
Lucas J. Mather.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. Enjoy your holidays, and
you too.
Look forward to reading your stuff on Facebook and Twitter.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great day, my friend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. That was that.
Yeah.
That was quite fun. Great time had by me and Jon, and I shared that on January 6th at 1:15 a.m. Wednesday, 2021, hours before the famous controversy that happened later. So, this was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Want you to take good care, guys, and we'll see you on the flip side, all right? Don't forget to check out Texas State House candidate Jon Schober, lesson learned running for office, and that's on the of course the YouTube channel, and we'll talk to you later. Okay.